Okay.
Good, 1 second so we can see it up there. Great, we are live. So hello
All
everyone and
right.
welcome to the sixth edition of the Locker Room Chat. As some of you know, this is a very special one because today we'll be moving from the athletes to a bit of more of a technical investment topics. And for those that are new here, their Locker Room Chat is part of my thought leadership project. It's called Winning at Value Creation is a lot like winning in sports. And this space is just a conversation where we try to get winning tips from people that are very accomplished in the industry or what they do. Today I have Umran Nayani with us. He's an entrepreneur, best-selling author, and applied researcher. He works at the intersection of private equity, financial engineering, and artificial intelligence, and he's also been an entrepreneur in brick and mortar enterprises. He's the author of multiple books on finance and private equity, and two of his most known titles are Private Equity Finance Made Easy and The Mechanics of Private Equity. He has over 150 number one rankings across Amazon globally, and his research. Is among the top 8% of the authors on the social science research network. That is a place where a lot of people can publish. So with this quick introduction, Omran, thank you so much for joining this locker room chat. And just for the benefit of everyone, we will be using a framework called the championship cycle to walk both through your career and good practices in
Yeah.
private equity. So it has 5 stages. So we will try to understand the game plan, or like what is the strategy, the draft day, how do you make it or companies make it in private equity, the season greeting, how do we create value, the game day or the exits, and then how all of this comes together for us to leave a legacy behind. So before we dive into all those themes, of course, I have given a brief introduction about you, but it's always good to hear from yourself. So can you tell us a bit about your background and your journey?
Yeah. All right. So first and foremost, thank you very much for that for that grateful introduction. You got the numbers and all of that correct. All right. So so my entrepreneurial journey, it basically started long before I ever started the first company. I would say it started back between 2009 to 11. I was in London. I was doing my MBA, and I was a student there. So while I was a student, I was working in Scottish and Southern Energy. That's a gas and electricity firm, and I was working as a district sales manager over there. Now, behind that fancy title, all I used to do was knock door to door and disturb the households and try to get them to switch their gas and electricity providers onto us. And I used to do that over 300 times a day. And one thing I realized doing that was there exists a very big disconnect between time and the income. That is what I realized very early on. So I had my students who were also working, but they were working by the hour, and there was always a cap to how much they could earn. So possibly, if let's say you are only allowed to work 20 hours, now in those 20 hours you could decide to go on a fixed pay. You would get $5 or something, or you could possibly do what I ended up doing, and that was earn commissions and incentives. So my first taste, I think, of entrepreneurship was in those 20 hours where my fellow students would probably only end up making 60, 70 pounds a week. I was making 500 to 1,500 pounds, depending on how much I would sell. So that disconnect between time and income or your potential, that became the entire thesis of my existence. So every waking minute, I would see how could I possibly maximize that leverage, and I started doing that intuitively. I was not actually doing that. Now, in the hindsight, I can see that is what I was optimizing for. So after I came back from London, I started working in Zycus Inc. and I was working as a spend analyst. And in Mumbai or in Indian households, I'm not sure what the culture is over there, but over here, the climbing the corporate ladder is very important for our parents and everyone. So you need to get a job, do the stability thing, and then you keep climbing up the career ladder. All right. So my dad, he's got like 30, 39, 40 years of corporate experience. He was a quality assurance manager for Maersk International. So he spent his entire life climbing the corporate ladder, and I was like, what is the highest rung on that corporate ladder? And for my company that I was working for, Zyka Sync, I got to know that the CEO was the company's director. And I was like, okay, so that's the highest level. So I could spend my entire life or whatever. That would be the top tier that I would possibly get into. And then my manager who recruited me, who did the interview, shortlisted me in that company, he floated an idea. It was just a vague idea of starting a crowdsourcing company. We would possibly take jobs outsourced through enterprises, and then we would crowdsource this onto individual, and we would possibly collect the difference. I didn't really understand the idea, but I understood the fact that possibly if I stop working and possibly create my own private limited firm, there is a chance, because if you create a private limited, you are a director by default. So that to me was again that thing. I was like, okay, so I can basically switch and end the entire curve of the corporate ladder by just doing this. The only flip side to that is if you become the director of your own company, the entire business model is on you. So you need to first figure out whether or not that company makes something. Otherwise, you're just a director to an empty shell. So I was like, okay, let's give ourselves 6 months. We'll start the business on the side or whatever. Give ourselves 6 months. If the business model or whatever clicks, we do this, and the only condition being after 6 months we turn this into a private limited firm and I get to be a director, and I get to basically cut my learning curve, the corporate ladder curve, to essentially zero. And that is what we did. So that was my first taste into actually creating the company. And and to me it all sounded, it's always been a speed run. So whatever decisions I also make in my business or my career choices, it's always been how do I collapse time to absolute beast level minimization, and then you
Mhm.
maximize the value. So that was my entrepreneurial journey. I still own the company, and now that company is what I always feared. It is still an empty shell because so that yeah, so that company, we grew to around 18 branches in 12 months. We started selling franchises of that. I've sold around 76 franchises of that. And then we got into software. We took the software profits, we got into online, and we started selling apparel, apparently because we thought that was cool. So we grew that to 8 figures as well. So we were doing multiple 8 figures in under 36 months. And certain incidents that happened, the macroeconomic environment suddenly shifted. If you remember, it was a very world famous incident, the November 8th demonetization in 2016. So that ended up pulling the rug out of my online business. And that was my very first taste into what could happen if the external scenarios don't play ball. And that was my first realization that your success is not only attributed to your individual brilliance. Beyond that time, I was like, everything we touch is turning into gold. So it is all us, it is all us. And apparently it's not. So the entrepreneurship journey was because of that reason. The reason I started learning private equity and got into learning valuations and investment banking was because of those verticals that I built, the software and the online verticals. I was able to capture value through profits. So that was already there. Now, despite me having an MBA and knowing, having a little bit of understanding as to what I was doing, I was not running blind, but still, not once did it ever occur to me that the biggest deal in my life could possibly be when I actually exit the business. And when I looked into it, I kind of understood that this is not a very small issue, that I'm part of a minority who possibly did not even think about it. This is a very big problem wherein business owners who start companies, they sometimes don't even have this in their mind that this could possibly be the biggest or greatest deal that they could ever do. So that is how I basically dove headfirst into learning everything I could about valuations, about private equity. And if I'd known then what I know now, I can promise you I would have built completely different companies. I mean, I would have sacrificed certain amount of growth, even forego some amount of profitability to create more robustness. But yeah, so that is the scar tissue is why I became so, you can say, I wouldn't say passionate. Passionate is a term where people use if it is something that they truly love. For me, this was identifying and scratching my own itch, so to speak, to figure out a way as to if I start something new the next time, I want to make sure I take these learnings and apply it in an institutional way. You cannot always be a rebel 360, you know. Sometimes you have to join hands with the devil, so to speak. So I was like, let's learn the way, let's learn the ways of what it takes to leave an asset behind that exists beyond you. And my publishing as a medium was just a way of my documentation. Now, what has happened is that publishing itself has evolved into a full fledged business. So, that was a byproduct of everything else. So, that was a brief, and that is how we are here right now. Yep. And apparently, it led to us talking. So, it's good anyway.
Great, great, great. Thanks, Umran, for sharing. Umran, from sharing that initial journey. So I'm taking a few things from here.
Hmm.
One is like your obsession to maximize value,
Yep.
and in that search through life that has a lot of curiosity. So the curiosity always keeps you questioning how to do things better, how to improve,
Yep.
and then of course we get the exposure, and the exposure comes from life giving us a lucky deal or an unlucky deal, and sometimes we'll have to learn more from the unlucky. And something I really like about your story is how you took the unlucky and not just dwell on it, but said, okay, this has happened. How then I move forward, learn from it, and then build something that is systematic from the future. And through that exposure, you started getting sort of your game plan or your strategy on how
Yeah.
to grow next. So this will lead us nicely to the next or the phase, the stage of the championship cycle, that is the game plan. So how do we build these game plans or these strategies? So in private equity, we could talk about it as where funds define their strategy. So what sector they invest, which geography, what value creation levers they play. And in a previous article I wrote, I compared it to soccer. So we said we have the lineup. So what sport you're playing, and what instrument you're using, what levers or the training ground that you're going to play, your style of play, or finding your niche, and then at the end knowing that there is a transfer window. But from your perspective on all the books you have written and all the good practices, can you give us a few tips of what in top of your mind is sort of a good game plan for a private equity firm or a venture capital firm?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think what separates very good and top performing outlier private equity firms from the ones that basically get mixed with the rest is they have very clear distinctions on what they are. So, for example, when the entire private equity boom actually started, there was a time where you could get away with the fact that you are a private equity firm in technology. If, let's say, that was your positioning a couple of decades back, you could possibly get away with that positioning. Right now, that positioning will lead you nowhere. So, what needs to happen is you need to have clarity on what your fund is actually going to do to a granular level that is almost similar to the clarity that I look for when I'm actually writing a book. So, for example, if I have an author or a professional who comes to me and they want to start writing a book or whatever. So, what I ask them is not what this book is going to be about. I ask them, who are you writing this book for? So let's say if you were to write and turn this entire thing into a book, I would not probe you on what the concept is or what it is. I would probe you on, can you identify or visualize that one single person whom this would benefit. So, for example, for a private equity firm, what that clarity looks like is, in today's time, let's say you start your positioning with private equity firm in tech. Then what we would do is we would want to go a step deeper. So you want to operate in tech. So is it consumer tech? Is it enterprise tech? Is it software? Is it hardware? Is it chips or is it models? Then you narrow it down further. Let's say you would say, I want to, it is a private equity firm operating in AI. Now what has happened is AI in and of itself is such a broad topic that and has lost its meaning to the point where it's still where it is similar to, I want to be a private equity firm in tech. So now what you need to do is you need to drill down. You need to drill down and identify levels. At what stage are you operating in? So let's say, let's stick with the artificial intelligence analogy. So you want to operate in the artificial intelligence tier. You are a private equity firm that does that. So what do you do? Do you acquire companies who are SaaS, who basically create vibe coding tools that help other professionals create prototypes, that is in the lovable category? Or are you based in the hardware category? Are you based in the cloud category that Amazon is doing? Or you are basically searching for companies in the intermediary that work between all of these layers? So you have these AI models, they suffer from memory loss and context drop off. So are you a private equity firm focused on firms that are patching that layer? So that level of clarity is very important. The other thing that I would stress, and that is not something that is relates to any deep understanding per se, but that has more to do with how private equity firms operate. So, private equity firms are not your passive investment vehicles. They are not like hedge funds, or even what I would say, they are not like venture capital. They are companies, they are an investment mechanism wherein the private equity firm would have foot on the ground, they would take over the company and they implement value creation. So this is where geography is a very underrated aspect that comes into play. So you cannot have your LPs in San Francisco and your GPs investing in Singapore. That is not how it works. You cannot Zoom call your way through value creation when it comes to private equity. No matter how much I yap on this call, that would not change how the firm will operate. I would have to have my foot on the ground when I'm hiring, when I'm firing. So geography is very important. The other thing, and this is something that does not get too much attention, is the firms that are absolutely successful and they are beast when it comes to the returns are the firms that even before they've actually looked at the financial statements of a target, they already know what changes are they going to do in that firm, plus they also have an understanding on how they are going to exit. So your entire existence is reverse engineering your way to the final outcome that is already clear to you. The clearer the outcome and clearer the steps to reverse engineer towards that outcome is what will determine your success today. You cannot simply get away with financial engineering wherein you would do some EBITDA levels and you adjust the business expenses to make sure EBITDA goes up and then you can flip it to a higher multiple. That is not how it works. It requires a lot more sophistication. So these are the four parameters that I would say, if the firm already knows what they want, what are they going to do to make it better, and how are they going to exit, and they know that even before they've looked at the financial statement of a target, you can be rest assured they are going to be all right. So that is what I've basically figured out. Yeah.
Thank you, Brandon. I think it's really nice to think about the private equity and the value creation component up front, because
Yeah.
at the end, what we're doing is working, or like private equity firms, what they're doing, despite what a lot of people may think, is really working to create actual value and to
Yeah.
build better companies and to improve operating systems, so that the
Yeah.
value really goes up. Um, so thanks for sharing that, and having sort of the end up front. because a lot of private equities, and like now we're in a big problem that exits are not happening at the pace that they should be. But if the ones that are happening are the ones that had followed that process of actually building a company that does create value, and it's a good company, so whoever is buying a nice asset. So talking about all this value that is created in the company world, can you move us a bit on your personal journey? How have you applied some of these principles to your own career, from the building the companies to the publishing the books, building the intellectual property, and how do you have this strategy mindset, or like this reverse engineering, when you
Yeah.
when you start thinking about what to build next?
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that we've always done, I mean, I have to attribute that to my partner, Mr. Farooq Qadriya. If he's listening on LinkedIn, shout out to you. All right. So what we had, so what we had always done was, and he used to tell me that, Umran, we are not in the business of business. We are in the business of running businesses. That always stayed with us. So what we have always done is we've always operated multiple companies in multiple domains, doing multiple things. So I've always kind of had this bird's eye view and the detailed eye view. And I know that the real value creation happens at the intersection. So I'll give you an example. So my software business, that was purely driven by sales. So everything that we sold, every single license was sold through our sales team. So we would get on the phone, we would do the demos, and we would sell. And then when we got into the online lifestyle business, what I understood was the entire sales model flipped on its teeth. So flipped on its head. So it was like you are getting orders while refreshing the dashboard, and I can see money that I could potentially get, that I will get in 2 weeks. I was like, that shifted something. And then there is a flip side of this. So when we were selling software, and this was not a very and this was not a deliberate decision, but what we were doing at that point of time was there was no cloud service that we were using to host. It was all behind the firewall. So we were just sending out the software, they would get it on their system. And for us, that was just a copy paste job. You understand? So you copy paste it, and every time you're like, I'm making money from thin air. So that was, to me, was zero replication cost. So that was an advantage for me. Now when it came to that online business selling physical inventory, that we I really ended up missing that, because every time you ship or sell a product, you have to manufacture it, and there is a cost attached to it. And it took us a while to adjust to the fact that not every business will have that level of margins. So now I am at an intersection looking at both of these variables. So when I started doing and building my IP business, the way in which I landed on this particular logic was, first and foremost, I never wanted to pay for any physical replication cost, if you will. I love that what I could get from the software business was the zero or marginal replication cost. And if you see, that is very well aligned within my intellectual property business. So let's say if I'm selling ebooks or whatever, audiobooks or anything, it is just a one-time creation cost, and then I can replicate it till infinity. Only thing I have to pay is just a small delivery fee or whatever, but that's fine. That is taken care of. The other thing is, for the physical products, the physical components that I had to stack the inventory. So even if I don't sell anything, I would still have to own the inventory, and that would take my competitive war chest, and that would empty some amount of it. So I wanted that handled between the business model itself. So if you see currently all my books, whatever distribution is, it is all print on demand. So what that means is I don't actually have to own any inventory. If my product does not sell, the only thing that I've lost is the time and the sweat equity that went into creating it. There is no physical inventory cash flow loss. Plus, all the sales that I'm looking at right now are happening online. So there is no salespeople getting on the phone and trying to sell the product. So what I'm trying to navigate, and what I was trying to navigate throughout this entire rebuild of my new business was, let's take the pros of this and let's throw away the cons of this model, and let's mix and match and create something that gives me a final version of what it looks like to get the best of both worlds. Now I'll give you an example of something else. That was one of the core reasons why I decided to get into intellectual property. Is if you are in the physical business, and if you've had any reasonable amount of success wherein you're moving around 1,000, 5,000 pieces of inventory, you would know that there are copycats coming to eat your lunch. That is inevitable, that is going to happen, because your physical product can be ordered by anyone, and your competitors reverse engineer the product, see what's working, and all they have to do is just copy paste and re-paraphrase your listing, and they have everything they need to sell. All right. Now, that's not very true for intellectual property. I mean, the Mechanics of Private Equity book, that is the only book that exists on the market. Of course, you have millions of books talking about private equity, but that exact content is irreplicable. And if somebody decides to do that, we have copyright laws to protect it. That was very appealing to me, in a way that I already had a method in place that I could legally use to shut out the copycats out the system. So
Hmm.
I took all of those learnings, and that is how I actually got into creating the first IP based product that I could have the best of both worlds inclined in. Now, there are sufficient cons to this. It is not as easy. This I learned this the hard way, because when you're selling knowledge or info product of any kind, what happens is you are betting on your audience willingness to take a shot on you, because you get value after you've read the book, you get value after you've gone through the course, but you have to make sure people pay before. There is no way of afterpay, read it and then pay us later. That does not work. So that was so that was something that I didn't initially realize how tough getting over that hesitation layer is. But once I learned how to do that, right now, I mean, I don't want to drink from my own Kool-Aid, but I can promise you this is what I've figured out so far. I can take any book, doesn't matter who the author is, doesn't matter who the topic is. I know what it takes to sell, and I have enough systems in place that for the X individual, it would look like all he did was flip a switch and I can see the orders. That is the level at which I've built my frameworks and evolved that. But it all happened through lessons learned. I mean, I don't let anything get past me without reflection, is what I'm saying. So my first title was an absolute bust, you can say. I barely sold 11 copies, right? Yeah, I'm not even joking. I barely sold 11 copies. Now, for most people who actually spend 6 months writing a book, and then for the market to not even download the book for free, and even if you try your best to give it away and only have 11 people, download it, they would consider that a massive failure. What I did, and this is the delusional Umran talking, that thought it was pretty good to start your company to minimize the corporate ladder climb. So this was me, and this is how I interpreted it. I was like, 11 people. I don't know who these folks are, all right, but these are the folks from the United States who decided that this exact setup that I have right now, the shabby cover, the listing with a typo in it, and my bio that a so-called publishing expert said this will never sell even a single copy because you mentioned sales, you're writing about innovation, there is a lot of disconnect. And then what the market tells me is 11 people want my stuff. That to me was a signal. In entrepreneurship, there is no roadmap. So I'm the one who does not need Google Maps. I carry a compass and I can follow the North Star. So those 11 people was enough of a signal for me to see there is something there. Maybe there isn't, maybe there isn't, but it is something worth considering and going deeper into the layers. And that is what I did. And right now, if you see, lo and behold, after 4.5 or 5 years of consistent compounding, you will see I've got more than 186,000 students in 187 countries. We've got 150,000 product moves. So all of that happened because of those first 11 people. I don't know who they are because Amazon does not tell us who the readers are, but whoever you are, thank you very much. All right, that was the signal I needed, and I kept going. So that is basically how it is. You see the signals and you follow those signals along. And one thing I've known from like over a decade of entrepreneurship, everything makes sense in hindsight. So while we are in it, everything looks like that chicken little, the world is falling on your face or whatever is happening. In the hindsight, it all makes sense. So I was like, maybe 3 years from now, this will make sense. And it is making sense. That is what I do. And that is the mantra you can say that I live by. It all makes sense in hindsight. You just have to stay in the game long enough. Yeah.
Thanks, Umran. So I want maybe to try to link this a bit to the people that are trying to start, let's say, a private equity fund or anything on their own. One thing is that you do need to have the exposure and the action, because a lot of people have come with good ideas and they are like, oh, we have this fund that will make these investments in this country and we have all this strategy, and then you ask them like, what have you done? And the track record is very important, and actually starting to build it up. So yes, there may be first time fund managers that come in, etc., but having the type of person, and at the end this is a people business, having the type of person that has tried, that has gone through the grind, that has the lessons learned and comes up at the end, is the type of support that an LP or an investor wants to give. So that helps me move to the draft day on like how people make it and what are the key components. You have shared a bit on like the grinding behind and the lessons, but like if we talk about sports, the draft day is when you select the talent. In the private equities, when you select the companies where you get selected or trusted with investment. So you have studied like many deals and financial models through your work and your writing. So when evaluating a potential investment or a firm, what are the two or three signals that immediately tell you that deal may be exceptional or that it's worth spending the time with them? So coming from the premise that at least we know that these people through their strategy are people that are doing things and proving themselves as you shared.
Yeah, yeah. So I would now, for a company to become a potential private equity target, and for the ability of that company to generate returns for you, the typical way is always there. I mean, so for example, you look at the profitability of that firm, you look at the cash flow and all of that. However, I think there are three mental models that you could possibly apply to identify outliers. So these are the mental models that I always typically start with. So you start with those mental models, three of them, and then you can get technical about it. So for example, and these mental models that I'm talking about, this is not necessarily for companies who are looking to immediately exit. So it depends on what your actual expectation is. So for example, if there is a fund like Vision Fund, like you had Masayoshi Son, he started his Vision Fund, and what he wanted to do was to raise the greatest and the biggest vision fund, greatest venture capital fund that ever existed, and he wanted to make those massive exits that he was able to do with Alibaba and all of that. If your expectation is that, what your mental model would look like would be completely different. If let's say your mental model, if let's say your expectation is to acquire companies and exit with an IRR of 25% or something within the 5 to 7 years, if that is what a private equity fund is looking to do, I would ground you back to the very basics, and those basics are come down to very simple things. First is the private equity fund that does not confuse activity with value creation.
Hmm.
So for example, let's say you've taken over a company. Now there are 50,000 things that you could do within that firm. All right. So the first thing, and this is one of the things that I've seen repeated countless times through all the funds that I've studied, and this is what they do in the first 90 days. Let's say they come in, First thing they would do is reduce the headcount. You reduce headcount by 40, and then you put in a new CFO. You possibly get a new CEO. All of that activity is not actually value creation. Now, I'll give you an example of where this activity becomes value creation. So, let's say you fired 40 people. That was fine. That will give you a marginal bump in your entire business process. So, you got those margins there. However, liquids find their own levels. You would need to hire those people, and those people would need to be replaced by someone else. Now, if there exists a single point of failure wherein this particular GP is always needed to make those hiring and firing decisions, what you've created is not value, you've created dependency. And there is a nuance to this. All right. So I'm not saying that GP should not be there. All I'm saying is this becomes a value creation wherein that GP is able to codify his learning and his decision making so that it can be passed on to an executive committee, or it can be passed on to the executive team, wherein they are then empowered and they know to take those decisions to manage the onboarding and the KPIs and everything. So now if you've codified it and it is something that a team can operate on, that is valuable. You've basically made that particular thing anti-fragile. And as Talib puts it, being anti-fragile has a premium to it. So that would be one of the things that I would say. If you are in private equity, if you're looking at targets, you need to know what you are going to do, how you are going to do it, and never confuse activity with value creation. The second thing what I would do is, if you're looking at targets, you, beyond the spreadsheets and the financials, look for payment and settlement cycles. This is a very underrated tactic, all right, but this has huge implications to the exit value. So let's say you are looking at your targets, the financials look good, they are profitable, they got EBITDA and all of that. However, when you look at settlement cycles, let's say they are at 120 days. So what is happening is they are going to get paid after 120 days, and between that time they are going to use money that they have in their accounts to service the orders or the business, or they are going to borrow against it. Now what you could do is, when you come in, this is one of the most underrated levers that you could pull. What you do is you negotiate your deals with your suppliers, with your customers in such a way wherein your suppliers would fund your deal. So this is what we used to do in our e-commerce operation as well. The people whom which you would buy the product for, we would buy it from credit. So you would tell them we'll pay you after 60 days or so, and when we would sell in the front end, we would only pay them back after we already got paid. So that gives you the float, and that float is where companies live and die. So if your float is very big, you then have sufficient war chest to survive the macro environment changes that are eventually going to happen and hamper with your exit, because there is no clean exits anywhere. Even KKR cannot manage that. All right. They also have to go through these headwinds. So this war chest compounds over time. Plus, what you also can do is, when you don't need debt to fund your operations, you will actually get debt at a much cheaper cost. That is the irony of the entire existence. If you don't need it, you get it. That is one of the other things that I would take care. So in terms of planning, and finally, what you could do is, while you are in that business side and while you are making those changes, the third thing that you could possibly look at would be opportunities towards subtraction. So the most natural way to look at a business would be looking at expansion, looking at markets, looking at, what I would highly implore and what I would focus on is first looking at subtraction and seeing where you can contract. So let's say you have a company who is in couple of domains, all right, and they have certain things going on the side. You need to compare the output per every business has multiple business within itself, even if it's a department, even if it's something else. If there is a way to exchange value between departments or between cost centers, you always do that. So I am always biased towards subtraction because I want to minimize my inputs and maximize my output. So these would be the three levers that you could possibly think about pulling. There are 50 other things that you could do, but these are just on the top of my mind what I would suggest. Now, there are broader mental models that I want to talk about. If we have time, we can discuss that, but necessarily that does not necessarily apply to private equity per se. That is more in the domain of making decisions at a longer or broader term horizon. But if you want, we can talk about that. But for now, these would be the three levers that I would recommend pulling: subtraction, codifying your knowledge, your operationalizing everything, SOPs and everything, and finally the float. Have always have a bias towards increasing your float. So let your suppliers give you the credit and let your buyers pay you early and you ride the float. So those would be the three things that can.
Thank you, Brian. So if I take a bit of the nuggets and the lessons here, will be when selecting a company or figuring out what to do with a company, just have in mind, of course, that they fit your strategy, but be very clear and intentional of what you can do in these areas. These areas being one. The focus of the company and trying to go deeper before going wider.
Yeah, yeah,
In terms of like focus and getting optimizing what you can do at the core of the company. Two, and this will be a bit on the fit, making sure that whatever the company is doing and the processes, you as an investor have the playbooks and the knowledge to improve those systems to make them repeatable and sustainable over time, and that both of you are a fit to each other. And then three, the underrated is also checking what is the cash that the company can be creating and have a deliberate playbook to optimize that in the first phase and find companies that have those easy quick wins to help you release cash. And at the end, we know like most companies don't go bust because they are not profitable, but they go bust because they don't have cash to meet like short term needs. So playing around with that early quick win and finding companies that have
yeah,
that optimization process will be great for choosing a company. I'm also very curious to hear about your personal um, framework and mind map that you were talking about. So please, if you
yeah.
can if you can share if you can
Yeah,
share
yeah,
about that
yeah.
decision
That is
framework on
very,
your own
very
life,
interesting.
that will be great. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so those are the three that what I've actually figured out is, and all of this is going back to things making sense in the hindsight. So in the thick of it, the people right there in the middle of it were also not able to capture the full value. And I'll give you examples. So there are three of the livers or whatever you want to call it, three mantras or whatever it is, but these are the three things that I'm seeing consistently where there exists an opportunity and the market consistently gets it wrong, and the people who are able to maximize and figure this out are the ones who come out a lot on top. So first principle that you could possibly look at, and this not only applies to private equity, this is in venture capital, your personal investing, whatever it is that you're doing. So the first principle is there is a huge misplacement by the market in terms of what the company is actually doing structurally. So there is an entire structure level misfit that the market is currently doing in terms of looking at the financials and what is the end result that the company is building. And I'll give you an example of it. So let's say Amazon through 1997 to 2007, every analyst on the planet had written down the company. They were like, Amazon is just a bloated book selling machine. It is a library or it is a bookstore that is burning through cash, that does not deserve anything, and sell, sell, sell. That was the verdict that was going on. What Amazon was building in that time between 1997 and 2000s was the e-commerce logistic infrastructure and the backbone that we are currently seeing right now. So it was creating structure that was completely mispriced and not being seen at the financial level. If in our existing lifetime we see any kind of things, that would be the indicator to go all in. I'll give you another example. Again, Amazon. So Amazon rode the 2000 tide, the stock, people were mispricing it. Again, they had to face similar market sentiment in the mid 2000s. What Amazon was actually doing at that time, that was he was Amazon was laying the foundation for AWS. That is again an infrastructure layer, but this time it is for the entire digital infrastructure. So they are building a layer to support the entire existence of internet. Market completely got that wrong. They were still looking at financials and they are like, no, this does not make sense. There is no profits, there is no dividends, they don't do anything. And what Amazon is doing is reinvesting every penny within itself. So this is mental model of framework that you can refer to. What is the numbers showing me and how is the story different beneath that layer? I'll give you another example. Nvidia. Right now, Nvidia is Nvidia, right? Everybody in hindsight is like, yeah, this was always supposed to be there. But when Nvidia was laying the groundwork for parallel computing in 2006 with their CUDA framework, they the investing community was so hostile towards him. Jensen Huang, he was literally, if you look at those interviews and you would see, he could feel it in his bones that his politeness was the only thing that was stopping him from telling him that you haven't caught up to the future. You are a stupid spreadsheet monkey. You don't understand where the future is going. He did not say that. But of course, if you look at it from a hindsight, what they've done is they've created the structural backbone of the entire AI economy that was not evident then. Of course, it was not even evident for Jensen Huang, but what was evident to him was when I shift from serial to parallel computing, of course, there is going to be massive value creation. You cannot price that intuition on a spreadsheet. So that is mental model number one. You look at the story beneath the spreadsheet and see what is actually happening when it comes to the structural aspect of it. The second thing, the second mental model, and this always works, all right, this there is, I'll give you a million examples of this never failing. You look at a company or you look at a stock, and let's see where the moat lies. The moat has to be generative, not defensive, and I'll explain what that means. If your moat lies in patents, copyright protections, trademarks, what you have is a defensive mode. Defensive mode have a shelf life. If your mode is generative, generative modes tend to compound. So I'll give you an example, social media. All right. Facebook at that time when it was a thing, when MySpace was dying, when Facebook was a thing, every new friend that comes into Facebook makes Facebook more relevant and more valuable. All right. Instagram, WhatsApp, the same thing applies now when TikTok came in. Now, Facebook got disrupted by TikTok. Why? Because they had the generative mode, but their generative mode was social. TikTok came in. It had the same generative mode, but what it did was it flipped the script on the generative mode and it made it interest based. So on Facebook and Instagram, there was a time where you would see content on people that you follow. TikTok comes in, understands what your algorithm is, what you're interested, and starts feeding you content based on your interest. It is a generative mode, but it is based on interest. Blockchain, the entire blockchain infrastructure is built on this logic. It is a generative mode. Every new node that gets added into the Bitcoin infrastructure makes it better for the entire community. Visa, MasterCard, every merchant that gets added onto the Visa ecosystem makes the card with the Visa logo more valuable. So if your moat is generative and not defensive, you have something there. Amazon Marketplace. We for years were trying to figure out a way wherein I could outsource my manufacturing cost to someone and only take on the profits. Amazon did that with its marketplace. So you have sellers doing it. So that is mental model number three. And finally, I won't take much time. The last mode is your if your moat lies at an epistemic layer, there is nothing beating you. I'll give you a very, very good example of this. So, Google Brains, all you need is attention paper. In 2017, you had Vaswani and team, they published that paper. Nobody was making anything about it. It was only famous within a very small pool of circle. Now, on the back of that epistemic logic, look at what OpenAI did and look at where we are right now. So, that is mental model number three. If something exists at an epistemic layer, which the market hasn't caught on to as of now, every new investor investing in an LLM company is paying a premium on the market, realizing the value of the epistemic logic. So each one of us is essentially paying a premium to the first movers who did not essentially create what we are seeing right now, but they understood the value on that epistemic logic. So these are the three tiers. Not many people talk about this, but if you frame it that way, if you look at investments, and this can apply to retail investing as well, if you look at it from the lens of these three tiers, you essentially would not be using comparative analysis. You'll just be focused on what works at a level that does not matter whether market is moving up and down in the short term. Yeah.
So for that, before I jump into other questions, I think I have like guttural mixed feelings. One is like, yes, there are certain investments or certain discoveries that will work in the long term, and investing in those is key if you actually understand the business, and you can sort of align with the level of thought that these founders have, and you buy into that vision. But when you are not understanding the business and just investing because it sounds credible, it's a huge risk.
Yeah.
So because I mean, Nvidia, they started like as a gaming company, and games didn't
Yeah.
make much money to make sure that the images were working well, etc. So if you're not like deep into technology and understand like actually that computing process could be changed and then used for AI in the future, uh, and then you start investing blindly, they must have been like others trying to do something similar in gaming. But for you to be able
Yeah.
to pick up and understand that technical expertise and knowledge needs to be there. So in hindsight, I'm like, I mean, I didn't invest in Nvidia at that point. I lost that wave, but I don't understand it. I don't
Yeah.
understand. I was not comfortable taking that risk. I didn't even know about it at that time. I've been getting curious about it recently. So I think there's also that level of matching the risk that you're willing to take as an investor with the knowledge that you have, and then this links up to the niche that you're building. So if you then build that deep expertise, then you're able to see the future with your founders. If you don't have that expertise, it's very risky. um,
Yeah.
so I will just like take that nugget there, that's why I have like conflicting things. Like I missed the Nvidia
Exactly.
wave completely, but I didn't understand it. So I
And
I
it's not you. Masayoshi San missed the Nvidia bus. Imagine that. That's what I'm saying. These mental models, it is very, very, it is absolutely inhuman if you're able to take advantage of these mental models while you're living in it. It these things tends to make sense in the hindsight. So Masayoshi San, right? He had 4.5% stake in Nvidia, and all he did was manage to get 3.5 billion at one time and something around 5 billion at the other. Whereas if you'd ever held that holding, that would be right now worth over 150 billion. So don't be too harsh on yourself. Masa couldn't see it, so it was very difficult for us mere mortals to also see it. But yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, but anyways, as we build in our lanes of expertise, etc., I think it's also important for us to bear in mind like what risk we're taking, and the level of understanding. So I know we have spoken for a long time, and there is a lot of other things I would like to ask you. If we could extend like for 10-15 minutes, if is that
Yeah,
okay
yeah.
for you?
I'm
Thank you.
at I'm at 12%, so we can extend as long as the battery runs out. So
Okay, 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 great. So we have sort of mixed in the other action, or on the other and the previous answers, a bit of the draft day and the season grind, that is where we create the value. So if I can take a few minutes to bring these things back together, will be to choose a company. We do need to understand where the value can be created, reverse engineer, and make sure that it's a fit. And then when we enter into the company, there are many levers that we can pull to create value. But the three that you will usually recommend will be not confusing activities with the actual value that needs to be created, and focusing on the center of the company, or that competitive advantage. Two, looking at cash release options. And then three, having the right systems to replicate this over time and make this investable. And then when looking at other companies from outside, and like great performers, having these mental models of things that can transcend time and leave that lasting value over time could help identify better companies in the future. So from your, I'm very curious about your own personal journey on the intellectual property side, on how do you actually create the value around the books, the research, and the knowledge platform. And if you could be like share with us like the main levers that you apply
yeah,
in this knowledge book. I think I managed to sort of summarize the main ones from the value creation side on a company private equity, but I'm very curious to understand a bit of your personal journey and your tips for creating value for ourselves.
yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I immediately focus on. So let's say I'm basically publishing in private equity, venture capital, and valuation, corporate finance space. You have to understand that is one of the most difficult and most highly competitive niches that you could possibly get into. All right, because it is filled with practitioners, it is filled with companies and publishers with millions and billions in budgets, and you have celebrity authors or whatever. So it is a very highly competitive, and it is a space wherein you have a lot of legacy players, you have companies, you have McKinsey doing the publishing, you have Wiley and all of that. Now for me to, let's say, share my voice with an individual or share my voice on that particular platform, I never start with the broader scope of things ever. What I actually do is, and I do this every single time, I tend to bring it down to one single person. So let's say when I started publishing, when I started creating intellectual property, I did not immediately start writing. The Initially, I started with podcasts. The reason why I did was, there is a healthy amount of rejection and failures that get into you identifying what will actually hit within the market, and you have to adjust your calibrations. And I did not want to spend that much time going into the depths of actually writing a 350-page book. So what I did was, again, it goes back to time and compression. I was not looking to get audience. I was looking for signals, even micro signals, and those micro signals recalibrate themselves to my target audience that I want to eventually get to. That is what my thing was, and I started experimenting in a medium where I can go on an offensive spree. Because for me to record a podcast, all it takes is doing this. All right, you turn on the speaker, you have these apps, the noise cancellation, all of that is handled within the apps, and I can knock out an episode a day. This is what I actually did. If you go online, you look at Digital Entrepreneur, you would literally see 150 episodes on Google Podcasts and Spotify and everywhere. And consistently, what I noticed through my creation was the review and the feedback mechanism. It is still rated 5 stars. So I understood that there exists a there exists a medium for my voice to exist. So my voice has certain level of differentiation. I did not even know what that differentiation was at that time. All right.
Mm.
Now I can actually reverse engineer, figure that out. So now that was one of the things. And when I started actually writing about private equity, it went back to my own learning in trying to find the actual resource that was catering to me. So I am not from, let's say, pedigree. All right, I don't come from a consulting background. I don't come from finance. I did my MBA. I did it in marketing, advocacy, if you will. So when I was trying to look for resources to learn private equity for myself, I noticed a very obvious gap in the market. Most of the content that you find on private equity or venture capital or any of these core financial subjects, there are actually two camps. One is highly academic. So that is written by Wiley Finance. It is Aswad Damodaran and all of that. You have, they already assume that the individual is aware of the vocabulary, and they are indifferent to the fact that somebody who wants to learn about this, how would he not know what value creation is? How does he? They can't even come down to a level wherein they would be like, this person might not actually know the definition of EBITDA. All right. But he has the capacity to understand what that could possibly mean. That differentiation is what I could sense because I come from an operator background. So I've grown businesses. So what you have to understand, the entrepreneurs and the operators are not essentially stupid. All right. Have the they understand sophistication. They are not just in your world wherein they are comfortable with the jargons that you have used to, hide behind your iron curtains, so to speak. Now, the way in which I'm also talking right now, you can see that outsiders or that rebel perspective shines through. And this is one of the things that I don't hide behind. So this was the gap that always stayed with me. The other thing when it comes to practitioners, and that was again leaning into what I wanted from those books, was I did not want to read the books. That was not my end goal. I wanted to apply them. And again, I looked at the content. It was either too academic, or it was dumbed down to a level where I found it was insulting. I mean, I'm not stupid. Like I said, I understand stuff, but don't give me sophistication, make it accessible. All right, you don't have to go down and talk in the voice of 5-year-old. That's not what I'm asking for. All I'm saying is, don't drain away the sophistication. We want the sophistication, let's make it accessible. And like they say, you want certain things done right, you have to do it yourself. So that is where I entered in, because that became very clear to me, to the point where I was like, you know what, of all the resources that I've studied and what I've done, if I synthesize this and if I put it across. So if you look at the titles as well, private equity finance made easy, mergers and acquisitions made simple, the mechanics of private equity, the mechanics of investment banking, it all ties down to the knowledge gaps that I noticed that were existing in the market. And rather than theorizing about it like most academics do, what I did was I pushed content out in the market. So let the market be the deciding factor. And what I had to do was make sure that the content served the audience that I was looking to reach. I was not looking to reach private equity professionals. I was not looking to reach people from a finance background. I was not looking to reach consultants. My positioning was very simple. If you are someone from the outside, I don't care who you are. If you're from a commerce background, if you are from chemistry background, I don't care who you are. If you are running a dry cleaning shop, or if you are a vet, I don't care. Whatever it is. All right, if you want to look at it from an outside in, I promise you, you will not find this condescending, and we would not basically make you feel dumb if you don't have the vocabulary access. So, one of the first things on my book was the private equity language, like you have. So every single jargon broken down. And then what I also do is, in my writing, I relate back to that definition. You don't even have to go to the dictionary. And all of these things were important because they were important for me. So if I read those academic books, I kept flipping through the definitions and all of that. So every every obstacle, or I wouldn't say obstacle, but every inconvenience that I had to face through to learn it, that became the weapon for me. And plus, I'll give you, this is an insider thing, always search the reviews 3 stars and under. That is where your maximum edge is. So you identify your competition, they already have books published, you search them through reviews and adjust the review filter from 3 stars and under. Those reviews are going to give you all the comparative insight you will ever need, because that is coming from the readers. And that was exactly what validated my assumptions. I was like, yes, this is actually real, and this is the positioning that I want to test. And again, I'm using the word test. I'm never attached to any possible thing that I'm attempting to do. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, you take the lessons and you double down. So this is how I approached the entire thing. Even before I published the first title, there were more than 250 pieces of content already in the market that fell flat on their face, but they gave me micro signals. Again, that delusional version coming into play. So yeah, so my bar for success is absolutely less. Yeah, absolute absolute worst what you expect is for me a success marker, and I built from there. Yeah.
Thanks, Imran, for sharing those details. And what I take out is like a winning tip on creating value, and perhaps an invitation to a lot of us that may be hesitant of putting ourselves out there and trying, is just to pilot and figure out how things are, and take every rejection or every success as information, not anything personal, or it's successful or not. It's just information that can help us keep building, keep refining, and keep growing. And that is how we actually create value, trying and getting feedback, and just trying again, and being clear.
The market is very, very brutal. Market does not give you outright feedback, so you have to learn through the signals. So whatever you get from the market is basically have to be thankful for it. Yeah.
Yeah, being grateful of those little signals. So then maybe just to start wrapping up, when we finish the investment cycle, at the end we need to sell the company, and linking it to a bit of the initial thoughts that you shared. If we think about this from the beginning, we are actually able to maximize our value way more, and we leave behind a lot of systems and a legacy. So can you walk us through a bit, how do you think about exits, or putting something out in the market, and then if you're asked what are you leaving behind, or what is your legacy, what would you want to share with people?
For me, you're talking about me personally, or you're talking about from the
Yeah.
investment perspective? For me personally, okay. So legacy. What I actually want to do is right now, when I started this, only thing that I wanted to get out of my entire IP or intellectual property publishing was I wanted to make sure that using all the learnings that I've got, am I able to validate that to the point that I can fill in the blanks to what I couldn't do previously. So I could not capture acquisition value previously through my other ventures. I captured profits and everything, all of that was in place, but I could not capture acquisition value for whatever reasons. Now, when I started building this, that was one of the core blocks that I was always working towards. And one thing that always stuck with me was good businesses or great businesses get bought. They are rarely sold. So for me, the thing that I was working towards was identifying and seeing, is the market calibrating my value creation enough that it is worthy of an acquisition. And that actually happened in 2025. So after 5 years of consistently doing it, the same title, Private Equity Finance Made Easy, through all the systems and mechanics behind it, made sure that the title never lost its bestseller positioning for over 3 years. So the since the time that I published it and since the time the rights were acquired, that book never lost its top five positioning on the bestseller list on Amazon ever. So, and I was very intentional about maintaining that. So when I achieved that, it was a very it was not something that is worth celebrating or whatever, but I knew that I could possibly do in practice what I was
It
building
is
towards.
worth celebrating. It is worth celebrating. It's everything is worth celebrating. Yes, congratulations.
Yes,
It's fine. Sorry.
yeah, and what one and the funny thing is now that that happened and that left my mind, right, because that was not a top of my mind anymore. It has opened like a Pandora's box of inbound things. So it's like almost every 3 days I get these inbound messages to acquire some other rights. And one thing that we don't talk about, this is specifically for business owners and entrepreneurs who actually exit something after the sale, it is not that good. I mean, you don't really feel that great. I mean, I can tell you, I essentially miss the rights of my entire North American markets of that book, because there is so much that I can do right now. So now when you talk about legacy, this is what I'm working on at the moment. What I'm actually working on is creating infinite knowledge loops for every knowledge worker. This is what I see the future is headed. So right now, let's say you've got 100 million books on Amazon. In the future, what's going to happen is you would not just be reading a book. You would essentially be talking to a book. You would essentially be arguing with the book. You would essentially be stress testing your frameworks with the book. And I would go as far as saying is the book is going to implement what you actually learned. And this is what I'm building towards personally. So right now, when I say I don't actually want to sell any of my rights or frameworks is because the market is moving in that direction wherein every framework and every book that I've written right now can be codified into an agent that actually does the stuff. And I was experimenting with this. And with my latest title, I actually released quite a few agents, a bouquet of 20, 25 agents that not only help you learn about investment banking, they actually help you execute. And this is what I see a tremendous future wherein this is going to be a default in the knowledge space. And that is what I want to create. Imagine this, there is a possibility of you creating a system that enables a user to personalize the implementation at any point in time based on whatever questions or queries they have based on what you've documented and written. That never existed in the past. So my book or that framework could essentially implement an infinite loop of knowledge that I don't even have to be in the room for. So right now we are having this coffee room chat. I can share my insights with you right now, but that needs me to be physically present. All right. Now this will reach a certain audience, but there is a tremendous demand of knowledge that is based in learned frameworks. What I want to do is I want to be able to create a system that does not necessarily need me in the room while giving them the complete 360-degree experience of what it would actually mean to listen to me yap about stuff. All right. So yeah, that is what I'm actually building towards. And the direction of the micro signals that I'm seeing is quite, I would say, favorable to that vision coming through. So let's see, that is what I'm personally doing. And I've actually written quite a few papers about it too. So it's not that I'm gatekeeping this. I did this for myself and then I put that in a paper and I was like, follow this if you any knowledge worker wants to do it for themselves too. So that is what it is. I don't believe in gatekeeping anything. I could, I would possibly make everything free if that were possible. However, there has to be certain degree of self qualification as well. So all of my content is mostly free or it costs less than what a Starbucks coffee would cost, and the quality is comparable to what would be published from what you would expect a Wiley Finance publication. So that disconnect is what I'm trying to create. The first disconnect that we spoke about, time and income, this is what it is, me applying it live in value and what it costs to access that, and then personalizing that value to you, to that person who is actually engaging with that resource. That is what I'm looking to build, and I'm actively doing it as we speak.
Thanks, Imran, for sharing that. Um, I could take two winning tips from here for people. One is for us to prepare for an exit, because when we sell, uh, if someone is in the seller side, there is a vacuum or something that you're letting go. So even though you receive money, you receive compensation, acknowledging that whenever you sell, the information is not perfect. So you don't know if you're leaving value on the table, or if you have maximized and there is a dip coming after. So willingly and making that preparation of again taking the risk and the uncertainty and dealing with it when an exit happens. And this also applies for any practitioner when they decide to buy. The information is never perfect, and in hindsight you really don't know. So working through that. And then two, for the legacy and building these models, I'm actually fascinated because I've always found books as great mentors, and
Yeah,
a way of learning and getting to know how other people think. But then just the thought of being able to put this on a chat, and you start asking questions that are answered through that framework for free.
yeah,
The level of mentorship and growth and democratization of knowledge that can come from that is just unbelievable. So I am personally staying tuned to see how this turns out, and it would be great to have all these models available. When we chatted before, you also mentioned that you will share like a link for an agent, for people
yeah.
to test. So I will share it also with my network when we create the newsletter. So I'll write a short piece after this to sort of try to capture all your lessons. So thank you so much for your time, and for sharing so openly all your knowledge. And it's very inspiring to see how generous you are with it. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Absolutely, it's been fun. Yeah, and those questions were very insightful. I had to sit with them for quite some time, and for a very long time, it was for me self-reflection without deadlines. So that was pretty good. It felt pretty liberating to actually do something with
Okay.
no stakes attached to it, not too much of a stake wherein you have to worry about what will happen. So that was quite good as well. So yeah, thank you very much, and hopefully the audience is not bored to death. That is my bar that I'm looking to clear with this.
We will get as you said. I'm also doing this for the love of the art and curiosity. So whatever signals we get from here, I'm taking them
Yeah,
with gratitude, and it's also out of personal interest to get
yeah.
to know what some successful people have gone through and how they think. So thank you, and we'll take the signals and the feedback from the market as
Well,
gifts. So anyone watching or anyone going through this, again, thanks so much for your time. Is not taken for granted. So thank you.
thank you very much. Cheers.